Hi, my name's Ruebi. I'm one of the horticulturalists and garden designers at the Greenery Garden Home in Heidelberg. This morning we're here in Kew, providing our garden services, so we thought we'd give you a demonstration on how we like to plant a tree. I believe that prior to visiting the nursery or beginning any sort of digging, it's important to choose the right tree for the right spot. I like to take into consideration the function of the tree, so whether or not you'd like it to provide shade, in that case you would be considering whether or not it's deciduous, whether or not it's just there for its aesthetic value. Take into account its environmental factors, so how the pH levels or clay levels in the soil are, whether or not there are any overhead power lines, if there are any structures nearby that are going to obstruct the growth of the tree. That will inform what kind of specimen you choose to plant in your garden down the track. I then like to take into account my soil preparation and digging conditions. Sometimes I'll wet down the local soils with a bit of water before I dig. That'll just soften it, make it a bit easier to dig a hole into. I then like to make sure that our tree has had a good soak before we decide to put it in the ground. When that root ball is nice and wet, it prevents any transplantation shock and ensures that it's got a good water and a good head start for when it settles into its new home. Then we need to go and dig the hole for the plant. So I always like to suggest a hole that is sort of like a shallow bowl shape. It needs to be as deep as the root ball that your plant actually comes in, the root ball being the collar or the existing sort of level of soil around the plant to the bottom of the pot there. We then need to go ahead and dig our hole for our plant. I always recommend a hole that is wider than it is deep. So something that is, the depth of the root ball itself of the plant, but perhaps 2 to 3 times wider. The reason we suggest digging a hole that is wider than it is deep is so that we can promote those lateral roots. And that way, especially in the tree's formative years, it's not going to fall over or sway in the wind too much. It'll really be anchored in the environment and be happy and healthy, be able to uptake more water and nutrients, all around a healthier, more long-lasting specimen. When digging your hole for your new plant, I always recommend using as much as your body weight on the shovel as possible. Engage the legs, engage your body weight, and use it to cantilever the spade or shovel backwards. This is going to stop any strain on your arms or shoulders, and it's going to stop you from feeling very sore the next day. So I've dug my hole. I'm pretty happy with the depth of it. The existing level of the soil inside the pot is pretty much flush with the earth around it. What I'm going to do now is spin it around in its nursery pot and figure out which position it looks best in. At this stage, just as you're taking your plant out of its pot, you might notice some fibrous roots on the surface of that root ball. It might be a little bit pot bound. That's okay. Try and retain as much of the root mass as possible, but by all means score it slightly. Take the side of a shovel. No need to go sort of make a bit of an incision, no more than 3 or 4 centimetres into the side of the pot there. We can then pop it into its hole and start backfilling with the existing local soil and some compost and other bits and pieces too. Before I backfill the hole with any dirt, I'm going to chuck in a little bit of all-purpose Osmocote. This is a slow-release fertiliser that will break down over about 6 months and just slowly help the plant along as it's establishing itself. Luckily, the soil on site today is pretty good, so we don't need to add any soil conditioners or improvers. If it was really, really sandy, I'd suggest adding a bit of Zugro compost. That's just an animal manure that will help improve the soil, add a bit of volume and condition it over time. For now, I'm just going to add a bit of slow release and fast release fertiliser. That's going to give it a good head start as the plant settles into its new home. I've now used this rake to even out the soil level around the tree, ensuring that there's no soil touching the base of the trunk there. I'm also going to add in a little bit of blood and bone. This is a hard-hitting fertiliser. This is the sort of product I'd recommend placing on your plants every 12 weeks or so. This is a little less gentle, but it's going to give it a good head start as it's coming into its growing season. For a tree this size, I'd recommend a small handful, perhaps sort of 2 or 3 heaped tablespoons, and that's going to be sprinkled around the base of the tree, not too close to the trunk as well. Once I do sprinkle the blood and bone around the base of the plant, I do often sort of tickle it into the top 5 centimetres of the soil, just so it actually soaks in when I choose to give it a water a few minutes down the track. Coming into the warmer months, I also like to add a little bit of Saturade. It's a granular soil wetter that's going to direct lots of water straight into the root ball. So in case your soil gets a bit hot and a bit hydrophobic as the weather begins to heat up, this is what's going to hold all of that water right at the surface of the soil and ensure that the roots stay nice and damp. You'll know that this product is working because once you've sprinkled it on, every time you water it, it bubbles up a little bit like detergent. That's perfect, it's doing the right thing. Like I said earlier, the soil on site this morning is pretty good and the tree itself is in a nice sheltered position. It's also going to be underplanted with some beautiful ground covers down the track. These are the kinds of things that would stop any water evaporation from the soil and probably mitigate any weed growth underneath as well in the future. I'm not going to do that today. At your house, however, you might choose to add a 5 centimetre thick layer of some sugarcane mulch or some lucerne. That will protect the roots of the newly planted tree and slow any weed growth as well. For now, I'm just going to get straight into watering. It's the final and most crucial step of the planting process. I'm going to add a couple of capfuls of sea salt into a 9-litre watering can and empty the entire thing on the specimen. Sea salt is a seaweed-based solution that is going to promote root growth. This is super important to be using every 2 weeks or so in the first 3 to 6 months of your plant being planted, which is super important to ensure that the plant settles into its new home. If you need help deciding what plant's going to suit your garden best, feel free to pop into the nursery in Heidelberg and chat to any of our expert staff. If you don't have the time or tools to plant your own plants at home, feel free to inquire about our delivery and installation service. We're open 6.5 days a week. Thanks for watching.